Hey everybody, it's Miss Shram. Today we are talking about cell theory. So at the end of this video, you should be able to recognize the components of cell theory. Okay, first of all, why is it important to study cell theory? Cell theory laid the foundation for modern biology and microbiology. It helped scientists define the characteristics of life. Without cell theory, we wouldn't have DNA sciences, we wouldn't have an understanding of reproduction, we wouldn't be able to study bacteria and work to cure illnesses and diseases. So at the very, very beginning of cell theory, we have these two guys, Hans and Zacharias Janssen. Hans was Zacharias' father, and they were Dutch spectacle makers. So they learned, spectacle makers is making glasses, right? So they learned that if you put a lens at one end of a tube and then another lens at the other end of the tube, it could make things significantly more visible. So you could look at something small and it would make it significantly larger, so you'd be able to see. So that invention is called the Compound Microscope, and they discovered that in 1595. The Compound Microscope is going to be vital in cell theory. So moving forward in time, there was an English scientist named Robert Hooke, and he published a book called Micrographia in 1665. Now in this book, it's a journal of all these illustrations of the smallest complete parts of an organism, which he called cells, which we know now are the basic structural units of life. So if you look closely at the picture on the right, there is a circle, and that is what he drew when he was looking at cork cells. So if you look very closely like he did, at cork cells, you'll see there's tiny little boxes. He called them cells because it reminded him of the housing they had at monasteries. So monks and nuns lived in tiny little rooms right next to each other that were called at that time cells. So that's what he decided to call those little boxes. And it stuck. Next, moving forward into the 1680s, we have Anton Vonlebenhoek. He is now known as the father of microbiology. He was a Dutch linen merchant, so he actually wasn't even a scientist, and he only went to school through elementary school. But he used microscopes and invented 500 microscopes and created 500 microscopes to see fabric up close. So while he had that, he also discovered he could look at other things besides fabric. So in the 1680s, he discovered blood cells, microscopic nematodes, and both protists and bacteria. He also coined the term animalcules, which we no longer use today, but when he was looking at the tiny cells, he thought they looked like tiny animals. So animalcules did not stick, but that's what he saw. All right, so on the left we have another man, Matthias Schleiden. In 1838, he discovered that all plants are made up of cells. And then his cohort, Theodor Schwann, in 1839, discovered that all animals are made up of cells. Then, closely after, in 1855, Rudolph Verchow, a German scientist or German physician, observed mitosis of cells under a microscope and claimed that living cells come from other living cells. This was wildly important because previously people thought that cells could come from non-living things. They thought fleas came from the sand and all sorts of things that we know not to be true today. So those last three scientists, Verchow, Schleiden, and Schwann, are credited for the classic cell theory. And these are the three main components of the classic cell theory. Number one, all living organisms are composed of one or more cells. Number two, the cell is the basic unit of life. 3, cells arise only from pre-existing cells. Now, as you can imagine, microscopes and technology have vastly improved what scientists are able to observe and discover. So modern-day scientists have made a few additions to cell theory, and they are here. So the first addition is energy flow occurs within cells. Hereditary information, or DNA, is passed on from cell to cell. And 3, all cells have the same basic chemical composition. And I imagine as technology continues to improve, there may be more additions. Science is always changing and improving. I'm going to leave you with these last 2 questions for cell theory. Why is cell theory important? And what tool was instrumental in forming cell theory? All right, I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.